Good morning.
Good morning. She's like, we're not there yet. Well,
see,
it's going to be one of those
not
days.
Tuesday.
It's not Tuesday. It's Wednesday. We don't know whether we're coming or going, I guess.
No.
So we're going to have some fun this morning. And
I know it's going to rain, though, because my head
yes,
hurts.
mine too. We're both like, oh. We both are suffering from a headache this morning. So apologies ahead.
Yeah.
I totally thought I was going to get here early enough to hang a cup of cheer behind us. That didn't happen.
No.
Oh, well. Next time.
Next week.
Maybe I'll have the borders all on next time.
Right.
I got half the borders stitched.
Yeah, you're doing good. Doing good. All right.
So many things.
This is a really big project. Lots of steps. So, yeah.
There's just, the book size tells it all.
Right.
Right?
Yeah, lots of little steps.
There's lots of stuff. So we're going to talk about the first few sections of type of blocks today. So we're going to talk about the little bit easier things, but there's a lot of them. So once you get to the back of the book, they get a little bit more involved because they're multi-hooping. But it's not necessarily that they're hard. There's just more steps and
more
you
pictures, more reading.
More reading. You got to pay attention. So this is the little bit easier of the items. And they are titled in your book either the applique or stitching blocks. Those are the ones we're going to talk about today. So we have, of course, tried to make things easier and pulled up some. It's going to be one of those, isn't it? There's so many buttons to push.
I'm like, which one?
So many buttons to push. It might be an applique block.
It is totally an applique block because that's where it was last time when I pulled it up.
Yep. So we're going to work with one pretty simple block in the hoop today because we don't want to take all the time stitching. So we chose a small simple block from a stitch standpoint. But the steps that we're going to walk you through are, hi Mom, the how to do a pre-quilted block and how to not do it, how to do a more traditional hooping. So what we would have done before all of this pre-quilting stuff came about.
Yes.
And give you our suggestions and tips and what you want to look at and all of that wonderful information.
And I'm going to pull up your, Lisa made this really cute
we've
file.
We've got this.
Still the wrong one.
Still. Nope, that's not it. Nope.
There aren't very many choices. Which one is it? All right.
I don't know.
Didn't this work? Okay.
Dum, dum, dum. I don't know. Where did it go?
There it is.
That one.
Apparently, it just had to be in some sort of weird sequential order.
Right. So, there's, yeah, that's what we're going to do.
Cup of cheer.
Cup of cheer. Isn't it cute? I had fun with paper. So, cup of cheer is obviously what we're working on. If anybody is just tuning in and doesn't know what the heck they're listening to, these are cup of cheer tips. And this we talked about last week, but I just wanted to kind of cover it real quick to make sure if anybody is just joining us that they had that information. And these are going to be available. They're not yet, but we will post these that you can download. So you can pull that up and have that for reference at home.
Yes, it's not there yet.
It's not there yet, so don't go look yet. Give me a little bit of time.
Yes, I will load them right after we're done.
So they will be there shortly. So this is what we did last time. We talked about the prep and getting yourself ready and make sure that you are doing all of the little bits and the pieces. So this particular page is talking about the size of your fusible and your batting, and we recommend that you pre-cut that so that you're all ready to go and have all of those backings fused before you even start anything.
Right, and this is strictly for your backgrounds.
This is just for the background fabrics.
Yes.
So again, we talked last week, sorting them into the 3 piles: backgrounds, fillers, and applique pieces.
Yep.
So I do have recommended products. We did cover a whole bunch of that last time. Go back and look at last week's if you want more of that information. This week, we're going to talk a little bit about the filler blocks too, because there's been a lot of this didn't work like I wanted it to out on like Kimberbellas and Fellas and things. So we thought we would give you guys some suggestions on how you can prevent that from happening, or how you can fix it if you've already stitched them and what you want to do. So that little chart there is how many of all of those blocks there are. There is a lot of filler blocks this time around. I personally pre-cut all my batting, which you said you had something. Did you have just for the quilt block in the machine?
Yes.
Okay.
I'm like, sorry. I'm like, what are we talking about? Yeah. So, filler blocks. Sorry, my headache. Wow.
Yeah, okay. I got it.
So I was reading some of the posts on the Kimberbella's website, and I was listening to a gal say, oh, you know, do all of these steps, like go forward and backwards in the design and do all of these things. So I got to thinking, I mean, it's really quick for me to make squares, right? So if you've done our designs and you've done Kimberbell designs, you know the process of the pre-quilting. You put your batting down,
and if you don't know, we're going to show you here in a
minute.
Then
you do your fabric, and your fabric is bigger than your larger piece. And so when it does the finals, or when it does
that quilting,
yes,
when it's bigger, you have excess fabric to compensate for any draw-in.
Right.
When you have pre-trimmed your filler blocks like the directions have you do, the concern is that that draw-in then makes my pieces too small, and then they're not the right size to put in the quilt.
Exactly.
So these are some suggestions that we have to help either fix that problem or prevent it from happening in the first place.
Yes.
So Sarah took a few minutes, I'm sure.
Yeah, it didn't take too long.
And made an actual basting stitch, square, rectangle,
yes,
whatever it happens to be, that you can add in for your filler blocks to tack the fabric down. And you said you made them a little bit bigger.
So here's what I did. Traditionally, right, you have your four basically squares.
Yep, batting,
fabric. And so what I did was the batting is always the cut size of
the square.
Right, which is the real size of your fabric piece.
It's the
minus your seam allowance.
Yes.
And so with the filler blocks, you have the sizes up there. What I did was I created a box for each of these filler boxes. And so like the 2.5 by 2.5, the first design, the first stitch out, the first
2
color,
by 2.
The first color is 2.5 by 2.5. So you put your batting down. It's that size. Then it's 2 by 2, and it does your batting. It tacks your batting down in there because you don't want in the 2 by 2.
Right.
So the first box is the placement for your batting. The second box is the trim down. Okay, and then what I did was the third box that goes down is also going to be the same size as that batting trim down version.
Okay, it's the same
size.
Okay.
It's just a larger piece. So in our boxes, the tack down for the fabric is pushed out further. Correct?
Yep.
So this one just has the basting box for the fabric at the actual finished size of the block, and I just made that stitch a little bit larger.
So it's easier to remove later because, of course,
yes,
it's going to be, in theory, right where you're sewing.
Yes.
And so those stitches may show through when you turn and look over on the other side of the quilt.
Exactly. So
easy to remove.
Yes, if it's showing through, it's very easy to remove. And if you purchased your designs from us, we gave you files that had with and without boxes, essentially. So if you picked this file with a without box file, then you wouldn't have to skip forward and backwards to do that. Because basically what they were recommending is that you go back to the batting trim line file.
Which is, of course, a tight stitch.
And we do ours twice.
Right. So that's a lot of stitching to remove later if it's showing. So
essentially,
this was our way of compensating for that.
Yes.
And so Sarah took a little bit of time and created those. Those are available already?
Yes, they are in the What's New part.
The What's New, and they are free.
Yes, there's no charge.
So if you have purchased our designs, if you didn't purchase, whatever, they're there. You can download them for free and use that. So what you would do is load that first, and then load the design file for the quilting afterwards without batting and placement lines.
Yes.
Which is how ours are separated.
I did put a PDF file in there with what the 3 colors are and what they're for, and then kind of a description of what you should do, just because it's a little bit different with that fabric tack down being in on top of the fabric trim or the batting trim line piece.
We're supposed to be live.
Yes, right. It's nice that it's telling us there. So I will put the link up in a little while for them to go there, but it's completely free. You do not have to use this. It was just, I thought this would be easier for people if they needed to move forward and backwards. Do you need your water?
I could have sworn I already grabbed it, but yes, if you don't mind.
I do not.
This lovely weather, ups and downs, and it's
But essentially,
thank you so much. I'm sorry.
That's okay. All of the little sizes that you see in this little chart here, there is a same size file in that filler file. I called it filler blocks.
Filler blocks. Fantastic.
I didn't know what else to call
them. I think that's exactly what they are. So that sounds fantastic. So we strongly suggest that you are pre-treating your fabrics before you cut. So that's going to help. If your fabric has starch in it already, it will absorb those stitches easier. So if you are pre-treating like we suggested last time and this time as well, we are just encouraging you to treat that before you cut. That will help with it not shifting and drawing in if it's a stiffer fabric, because we like those stiff fabrics, right?
We do.
We do. So that is, of course, important. It will be especially, as I wrote in there, helpful with the filler blocks. So there's lots and lots of those. So these are the other little things that we've got on there. So starch before cutting. That's the number one thing I've got on there. The second thing is add a basting stitch. So you can use Sarah's. If you already have something in that you've been working on and you don't want to go that route, a lot of machines have basting stitches. By all means, do what you want to do and make those adjustments. So that is an option. So that will keep your fabric from shifting. So that's the idea. What we're doing a lot of times, if we're not taping it or whatnot, which I ended up doing on a few of the blocks tended to shift. The 2-inch wide ones I found shifted more than anything else. And so I was taping those in place so they weren't shifting when I put them down, because they're already trimmed, so there is no excess to hold them in place. Hence the basting stitch that we are providing and we're suggesting. So what that's going to do is keep it from moving and pulling as the quilting is being stitched, because the design is already the same size as your block is cut from the pre-cutting at the beginning. You could, of course, try to go through all of the pieces and cut them a little bit bigger, but then you're still trimming down after the fact. So I'm not sure. I think that sounds way more complicated, especially because they're kind of intermixed in the other blocks in her cutting chart. So I think this is probably the better route to go. If you have said, oh crap, I already did all of those and you've already stitched, when you are trimming after your stitch outs, don't cut right at the fabric edges. Use a ruler and use the stabilizer that we stitched them on as a fill-in for any space that was drawn in while stitching, which is what I did. So there are certainly lots of ways that these things could happen. If you have already stitched, like obviously I did, that is how I have compensated from any other quilt in the past when there weren't quite as many. But that is how I generally have fixed the problem in the past. I just use my no-show mesh and I cut it to the 2x2 or 2.5 by 2.5, excuse me. So there might be stabilizer sticking out somewhere, and that is what I use to line up with the next block or whatnot when I'm sewing them together.
Yeah.
Because you're not going to get a 1/2 inch of draw in. You're going to have fabric there to put in the seam. That's not a problem. It's the little bit edges that you won't have to correctly line them up so that things won't match up quite like they're supposed to.
Absolutely.
So that is an option as well if you have already done it, or you're like, yeah, all that other stuff sounds way too involved for me. You can use your stabilizer as a fill, quote unquote, for any draw in when you're trimming them down out of the stabilizer.
Absolutely.
So that is everything that we've got on that tip page there. And if you've got any questions, you're confused. Okay. The I don't have them on my stick, so
I can put them on the
okay.
stick. We'll do this.
Well, let's go through what we've already got prepared, and then we can do that at the end.
Yeah.
We'll show what we're talking about. So, what we have prepared today is.
Is there any more?
Just the steps if you want to go
steps.
forward.
All right. Yep.
So these are if you are doing a.
Come on. There we go.
If you are stitching using block by block quilting. So it looks like a lot of steps. It's not actually, because there's actually stitch outs in there as well, but that is the difference between this and a traditional, which is the next slide. So the first thing is you're going to choose from your USB the desired quilting pattern. The things that you want to make sure that you're looking at are, one, what is the finished size of the block? So very important, if at the end of the directions, it will say trimming instructions, and it will say square the finished block to. That is the size quilting pattern that you want to select to put in the hoop. That is giving you the actual lines that you need for finishing the block out. So that is choosing the correct size. There is also quite a few blocks that are directional. So if it is a rectangle instead of a square, you want to make sure that it is going horizontal or vertical as it's going to lay out in the finished quilt. So make sure that you are following those instructions. Once you have your quilt design selected and on screen, you're going to press add, go back to your USB, and choose the embroidery design for the block. Pull that in, and then step number 3 is check for any special alignment instructions. Some of these they need to be moved into the seam allowance, or, sometimes it just says center the block, and that's great. Then you don't have to do anything because the design will come in already centered. But you always want to check before you start stitching, because you'll use up all of your fabric, and then you'll be like, oh crud, I need to restitch that.
Exactly.
Because it's not going to be laid out right. And now I need to stitch it again. So make sure that you are checking for any alignment instructions before you begin stitching. So move the design up, down, so on and so forth. In particular, there are some house pieces and the tree with the bucket that you need the edges to meet in the seam allowance. So they're going to have you slide that either down or up so that those pieces meet when you sew the top to the bottom together. So it is definitely going to be happening. So make sure that you're paying attention, because there's quite a few blocks, a nice handful of blocks that do have you shift it. Once you have that, you're going to hoop your no-show mesh, and that's going to be all by itself in that required hoop size. So whatever your finished block size is going to determine what hoop that you need. So your embroidery design may be a 4x4 design, but by the time you add the quilting, you might bump yourself out of a hoop that you thought you were going to be able to use. So for instance, a 4.5 by 4.5 quilt square can't go in a 4x4 hoop. So you have to bump up to the 5x7.
Absolutely.
So that's why I say the required hoop size there. And then the steps are very straightforward. As we were just talking, you have a batting placement and a batting tack down, and then you're going to trim, of course, and then you're going to stitch, trim the batting. Yep.
It's small, isn't it?
It is from here, yeah. I was just like, did I not write that? So cover that up, of course, tack it down, and then trim. And then you're going to do the placement line for your fabric backing, and then cover, and then tack that down. I'm not going to lie, I usually skip the fabric because I've always got plenty. I just slap it down and skip a stitch. So not gonna lie, I skipped that part, but it's in all of the patterns. So I put it in the instructions. So you are not trimming your background fabrics. Just to be very, very clear, we are not trimming any backgrounds. That is going to allow for all of that pull in, so you don't have that issue with your embroidered blocks. All right. And then once you have all of those placed, you're going to stitch your desired quilting design that you chose. Make sure that you choose the thread color that you would like, and then begin stitching the embroidery design following the instructions as provided. So that is the block by block. So let's go ahead and do that.
Okay.
All right. So we have we have no show mesh in our hoop. That is all that's there. There's no batting. There's no anything else. And we just have standard embroidery. I have chose this. We're not going to change thread today.
Okay. I was like, did I forget something?
No.
Okay.
So I just have the color that we're going to end up using for the satin stitch later on as well. It'll look great.
Yeah.
But I just, FYI, you normally would have a quilting design color and then changing thread colors. We're going to keep everything simple today and not do that. So I just have a very, very light pale green thread in. And we are going to hit embroidery on the machine. I'm like, why isn't it red? Why is it red? What's going on?
I didn't do my job.
It's all good. You didn't push my buttons yet today?
I didn't push the right buttons today. It sounds so different.
It definitely sounds different than the other machine. All right, so we just have a square that's been stitched on the stabilizer. We have a pre-cut square of batting, which you should also, if you followed any of our suggestions. We're going to completely cover that up and tack that in place. So sorry, excuse me. So our batting sizes, as you can see, are still larger than the finished size of the block. So you will always still have plenty of batting to hang on to, but they don't need to be the full size of your background piece. So if you were following our cutting diagram, you'll notice that the batting is smaller than your background or your fusibles. And that's just to save on batting because, you know, why not? So I'm now going to remove that from the outside edges. And you want to trim as close to that stitch line as possible. This is going to prevent the batting from getting in your seam allowance.
All right, so I've loaded the PDF file that we just showed onto the same, just as another drop-down menu.
Okay.
And then I changed the name to SNL Extras for Cup of Cheer from Kimberbell. So I'll put a new link to that up, and then everybody should be able to get to it.
So those will be there whenever you would like to go search for them.
Yes.
All right, so we now have that trimmed. The next is the placement line for the fabric. This is the one I usually skip when I'm stitching at home. I just hit my needle, jump ahead to the next color because I know it's going to be bigger.
Right.
So this is just one less thing that I didn't do that.
What's that?
Usable.
Oh, so I think we'll be okay for this. Yeah. I didn't even pay attention to it this morning. I saw him sitting there.
I did pretty good starch on them, but
you did,
that's
yes,
as far as I got.
Absolutely.
All right, so this is going to be your placement line for your fabric, and you want to completely cover that over. That will also end up being your cut line. So this is telling me how large it's going to be when I'm done, and it's going to basically be that cut line within reason. So if there's a lot of draw in, your cut line might not actually be quite in the right spot. You may need to actually measure with your orange pop rulers or whatever and cut slightly outside of this line as needed. All right, so we're going to tack down our fabric. These are your backgrounds. They should have your fusible woven fused to the back. All right, so this is the tack down. At this point, we've got all of the batting and the fabric secured to the stabilizers. So when you're doing the pre-quilting, you don't run the risk of having all of the pull in and the issues that you might have from doing those filler blocks, which is where we talked about those earlier. So we just are going to do a quick quilting pattern. These are little Christmas bulb lights. These are really, really cute. You did a great job on this one.
I love it when you when what you want to do
actually comes out
the way that you want it to when you're digitizing.
Yep.
I am a terrible drawer, so I always feel like it's such a great when it comes out.
It's a great feat when it actually looks like you want.
Yeah.
I used most of the designs. There's a few that I didn't get to, but I used most of them. This one is super cute though. I use this one a lot. So I don't like my quilting to be like a, wow, look at the quilting. You know, the main thing for me anyways is the embroidery that's on the top.
Exactly.
So whatever you prefer, of course, is there's nothing wrong with that if you feel differently.
Oh yeah, for sure. That's the beauty of it, right?
Absolutely. That's why everybody's is their own. You know, and there is the thought process of, you know, if you took it to a quilter, it would be all in the same thread. You could choose a color and do all of your quilting in that one color so that it was consistent throughout. There's all different ways of looking at it. So it's just a matter of what works for you. So at this point, the quilting is done. So we are now into the embroidery. So because we've combined those on our screen, it's coming up automatically. If you have a machine that doesn't allow you to combine that, it's a little bit harder for you if you are trying to align them. But if I'm hoping that you have the ability to combine if you're doing the background quilting, because getting that top piece aligned is super important. And it would be a little bit harder if you had to add the design in at this point and then shift it to know exactly where you would end up being.
Most default to the center, so as
most
long as
do.
You're not
so as long as it's not one of those that are
shifty,
and then you'd be just fine. Absolutely. So at this point, we're going to start the embroidery of the design. And again, we are working on the present block, which is basically just a box with ribbon coming out of it. So the first color for that, is the ribbon tack down.
And we're really just following the instructions in the book, which is on page 15. If you're looking at your book, this is, and there's a couple of these in.
You're going to need 3 of them. Yep.
A few. Let me get my correct word. A few, not a couple.
And they are all the same colors and backgrounds and everything. So if you want to just rinse and repeat, once you get it in there, just make all 3 of the same. You can do that. Or, of course, you could change the background quilting if you wanted to do that as well. I can kind of see those. All right, so these are literally just little straight lines that, in our case, meet right at the edges of our little quilting pattern. So I didn't have any more of the white ribbon that's in the kits. This is just ribbon we had here in the shop. So this is much larger than what would be in the kit, just FYI. Yours wouldn't look like this, all right?
So it's wider, right?
It is. This is wider and it's red instead of white.
Okay.
All right. So what we're going to do is cover that approximately 1/4 of an inch and tape that down, completely covering the stitch line, because it's going to go and tack that down, and you don't want your foot to catch on any parts of that ribbon. You're going to put it with the short ends towards the center, if anybody is confused by that, so that when we place our fabric later on, we will
be able to tie our ribbon.
Be able to tie the ribbon around it. Exactly.
Do you want to pull that out just so that they can see all four?
Yep. You bet. Oh, I taped my thread. Don't do that. There we go.
Do you want it on the other one? Camera?
Sure.
Or that one?
Sure.
There
No, that's fine.
Oh, well.
Did we turn it on?
Nope, there we go. It is. I have to push the right button.
Oh, we're really zoomed in too.
Still not pushing the right buttons.
So again, there is a little line that I covered, and then you want your excess ribbon going over the outside edges, and you're going to make sure that you are completely covering those edges with tape, so the foot does not get caught.
Yes.
All right. Got to zoom that camera out a little bit because that was really zoomed in. All right, so we're going to basically repeat that straight line stitch that's going to put those in position. Doop, 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 doop. When I was sewing the pieces, I was on this machine, and I was like, this doesn't feel like 1,000 stitches a minute. I was like, this doesn't feel as fast as I'm used to.
You know, should I go put a fusible backing on the other one for sure? Because, okay, so I'm going to just sneak over here, even though I already put all of this stuff on.
Sorry.
It's not your fault. It's mine. I had it in my hand this morning, and I was like, I feel like I'm forgetting something, so.
All right, I am just removing all of those pieces of tape because we're going to cover those up here next, and we don't want tape sticking out. So it should tear away extremely easily because that stitch that's holding them in place just literally cuts the tape pretty easily. At this point, for this particular square, we need to now cover up all of those edges for the same reason we covered them up with tape before. We're going to cover them up with a water-soluble topping. So for anyone who is unfamiliar with that, that is the super clear, really kind of saran wrappy feeling type topper. It's going to be a water-soluble, but that isn't actually going to make any difference because we're going to tear it all away here in just a minute. But we need that there so again your foot does not catch on any of the ribbon. So let's go ahead and stitch that down, and it's going to give us the placement line for our present fabric. All right, so we now need to cover that up with the fabric. Doop, doop, doop. Here it is. Leave your topping in place. The fabric in your kit is darker than this, and of course your red ribbon is not going to be red, so you won't be seeing that in the actual stitch out. I can see the red ribbon through that pretty easily. That won't be a problem because that's not the actual colors in the kits, so ignore that. I'm now going to trim that away. So we've got a water-soluble topper we're leaving in place. We want to keep that ribbon away from our needle and foot. So we're going to trim the fabric. We are not trimming the topper. All right, so I have my ribbons still in place and they are now tacked underneath that fabric, and my topper is still in place. We're leaving that all there. And now we are going to do the satin stitch line, which is the last part of this design. Just make sure that your ribbons aren't getting caught up in any spots. Oh, good. Oh, good. I don't think it made a difference that we whispered.
No. I am sure it did not.
So this is the satin stitch line, and it's just going to go around the outside edge. So this was a pretty simple block, but it is still different than what we've been doing. I don't remember ever putting 4 pieces of ribbon underneath something and whatnot. I mean, ribbon, yes, but usually only 1 piece.
Right.
As a loop or something like that.
I feel like we've done 2.
I've done 2, but I've never done 4.
It's our first present.
So I thought 1, it's a short stitch out, and 2, it is a little different, so this would be a good choice.
Mm-hmm. Jan says that she's having a lot of fun watching us, and an embroidery machine purchase is definitely in her wheelhouse. It's coming soon.
Well, we're going to have some new ones.
Stuff.
We'll know tomorrow. Well, we'll know tonight. You guys will know tomorrow.
Yeah.
I'm still waffling when am I gonna run out of here at 5 and get home, or am I gonna be here till like 8 o'clock tonight? And I'm thinking I'm gonna run out of here at
I would totally
5:30 and make sure I get home, because I don't want to be here that long.
Mm-mm. Unless you leave for a few hours so you can have a life and then come back.
But where would I go?
I
don't have a life. What would I do? I could go take a nap in my car. That actually sounds fantastic. So you'll actually only see a very little bit of the quilting design on here. So they recommend in the pictures, they show 2 of them the same and 1 of them different. Mm-hmm. In my opinion, it's not worth changing the programming in your machine.
Yeah.
Because you're not going to see enough to make it worth, there's very little space around the outside edge that is going to be shown. Not worth it.
Right.
Just leave it all in there and make 3.
So it's creeping up over there.
Yeah, it likes to do that, doesn't it?
Mm-hmm.
You, of course, can tape down your topper and your fabric, and y'all know I'm not going to ever do that. Unless it's absolutely necessary. If you see me using tape, it's because you have to.
Yeah.
Because
she tried it without it and it didn't
If I
work.
am using tape, then you need to be using tape. No question about it. If I'm using it, it definitely needs to be in your hoop. If it's not necessary, I'm not taking my time to do that. It's not about the cost of the tape. It's about the time and the energy of putting it on and off. And
I got blue glitter today.
it's very pretty. I noticed it.
It kind of matches your shirt.
Yeah. I got nothing. I need to do this. I need to do something, because this one's just, that's the one that broke. And it was the first nail I'd had break with, which I guess is a pretty good pretty good run that I didn't have any crack or break before that. But you should have seen me with my Dremel. Trying to get off all of the color, and you can still see there's little bits. But I was literally sanding off my skin.
And there's no easy way to do that.
No, which, I mean, that's what they use there.
Yeah.
So I was like, I need one of those. And it worked pretty well. The guy that came up and asked me if I needed any help at the store, he was like, well, what kind of project are you working on? I'm like, I need to file my nails off. And he was like, what? I'm like, well, it's what they use at the store. And he's like, and you're going to do that to yourself? Do you need Band-Aids too? I was like, well, I hope not. I'm like, I got a plan. You know, my good hand, I'm going to move the tool. And my bad hand, I'm going to move my hand. He's like, that's actually a pretty sound plan. And I'm like, see, I've thought this out. And it worked pretty well. I nicked a couple spots, but no blood.
That's good.
But you definitely knew when you hit it.
Yeah.
It's like, woo! There's a little bit of skin that just came off. Wakes you right up.
Don't do that when you're sleepy.
Don't do that when you're not fully alert and paying attention to what's happening. So we are coming around for the last 1.5-inch of that satin stitch, and then this block is basically done. So all we would need to do is remove the water topping, which is literally a tearaway and perforates right off of there. And then your ribbons, you're going to tie. I tied mine like really crazy to keep them all mushed together so that they weren't in my ruler's way and my blade's way and my needle's way when I was sewing the pieces together. So I just tied a crazy whole bunch of stuff and kept them all bundled in the middle there. So you want to hit over this way?
Yes.
So here we are, and I'm just literally going to pull that towards the design, and that topper is just going to disappear. What's underneath you don't need to worry about, so it's just going to stay in there. So that is literally all done, and then using a ruler, double check and make sure that there's no draw in, otherwise you're going to cut on that outside line here. So we've got, you can do 2 bows if you would like and tie those, or what I actually ended up doing, and with the thinner ribbon it works a little bit easier. I tied it this way, so I took, it kind of made them into 2s instead of 4s. And
you
then
slide up just a little. There you go.
So let me do that again then. So I took the sides, and again, with the thinner ribbon, they lay down much better than this. And then tied my bow with that, and it seemed to lay down a little bit better than having 2 bows in the middle. Which, again, these are super thick comparatively, but I found that looked better tied. And the idea is that you could tie something into those ribbons. So, you know, candy canes or whatever it happens to be, that's what the thought process is behind this. So these will each have a little circle stitched number placed in the block with it. So that's why there's no number on the block. So that is the quilt block by block. That's how that happens.
Yes.
So
really quickly, Kathy asked, is the no-show mesh the same product as the Kimberbell light mesh cutaway? We kind of just use no-show mesh as a generic name because there's so many different good products out there that you can use. But essentially, it is. Kimberbell has 2 no-show meshes. They have a light and a, is the other one?
Ultralight.
Ultralight, thank you. So they have 2 different weights of no-show mesh. But yes, this one would be comparable to the standard light mesh cutaway, just as an FYI. Okay, so now we're going to talk about
Well, you got these orange pop rulers here, so I thought I would do that real quick. since the other one won't have a quilt line to do that with.
True.
So this is the 4x4, and I realize that you can't really see. I'm looking to see any of these got any ink in them. Can you see that?
A little bit.
I am literally just drawing on my thread, trying to help you guys visually see where that outside stitch line is a little bit. At least it's better than nothing, right? So the idea with the orange pop ruler is that you would center visually, and if you have markings, which we have on the other one, so we can do this again with the other if you would like, but you are going to use the inside line and adjust. So this one actually doesn't appear to have drawn in really at all. It is like right on that line, which is fantastic.
Yeah.
So what you would do is take a rotary, and the smaller ones are easier because they come back into the nook and cranny corner pieces a little bit easier.
I don't know if that's actually a good blade or not. Just
Well,
FYI.
we'll wing it. And then you are going to cut each side. This is actually sitting on a rotary mat, which is recommended because you just turn it. And so without having to move your project or your alignment, you then cut the next size. When you purchase orange pop rulers, they come with grips that you put where you want them to go. Mm-hmm. They don't come pre-gripped. So ours don't have those on there. Mm-mm. They got lost somewhere in the shuffle. So mine's sliding just a hair. With your grip, it won't do that.
Right. And you can add like the bigger size on the outside.
You can, yep. So if you want more to hang on to, you can have a little bit more secure grip by adding the next piece out. And so that gives me, as you can see, a little bit more to push and hold. And then again, I'm going to do that middle. And sometimes you still get little bits, which is fine. It's super easy. You just kind of clip. It's usually just a little thread. Mm-hmm. And of course, it would happen when I'm live.
Right.
I usually can do it without.
The other thing that you can also do is you can put, so if you don't want to cut on the inside of the ruler,
you
could cut on the outside by putting the little ruler. Once you have like it all set, you could put that little ruler over top of it, pull the outside out, and trim around that one. So lots of different ways.
For blocks that have this kind of an embellishment, though, the orange pop rulers are actually way easier because you don't have the ruler tick-tocking over top of whatever you've got sitting on top. So we've got 3 with the ribbons, which even the thin ribbon is still a bulk once you get all 4 of them bundled into the middle. Mm-hmm. And of course, you can't cut with them floating out there or else they're going to get cut. And we have,
ribbon.
I know, right? And then we have the 2 with the zipper. Yeah. And that zipper pull causes a problem with the ruler rocking. So the orange pop rulers are fantastic for things like that because you don't have that concern. Yep. You have an open space that all of that can sit without interfering with your cut line.
Exactly.
So these are fantastic for a multitude of reasons, but the rotary mat absolutely is helpful when you're using them.
But you can use them in so many different ways to help you cut your pieces.
There's lots of different ways, and if you are reading through the book, when you have rectangles or odd-shaped pieces, they show you how you can mix and match them to make all of the different sizes that you need. So they're super easy to use. I do like the smaller blade. I find that it gets in there a little bit easier, but it works so easy. And
yeah, absolutely.
We had one mat over there the last time I looked, but if you need a mat and we don't have one, we can certainly get you one.
Yeah.
This is great, and this size is usually plenty large enough for whatever your project is. It comes in a little bit smaller one, which I have. I think it's a 9x9 or 8x8 or something like that. That one's almost too small. I have them both at home and I never use the other one.
Yeah.
So I use this one all the time. So that is an option as well. All right, so let's chuck that stuff out of the way.
Kathy asked, do we have the orange pop rulers in store? Do we have them in stock?
I believe so.
I believe so. We usually carry them in the store. When we get stitching, I can confirm and I can plop up the place on the website where they're at.
Yeah. I'm almost positive, unless somebody's bought them and I missed it, that we have them.
Yeah. So Marilyn asked, is the block now 4x5 or 4.5 by 4.5? So it is 4.5 by 4.5 because that was a square ruler.
So if you are, I don't know, can you guys see that?
Yep.
So this actually gives you the cut size and the finish size on these rulers. So no matter what numbers are floating in your head, you can grab the correct one. And so if you are looking on,
yep,
you can see that I am right on the money of 4.5 by 4.5.
And so when you take your seam allowance into consideration, there's 1/4 of an inch all the way around.
All the way.
That makes that block finished at 4 by 4.
Yep. And so you can see what we meant by you're not going to see much of that quilting. So it's really not, this particular block, don't take the time to change the quilting pattern because it's not going to matter.
No.
This is one of those that's just not got much else showing other than the main piece.
And so for those of you, so the way we just did it is wildly popular, right? It's really great because you can do custom quilting on your quilt. But I still see a lot of people online who would like to do this the more traditional way. They want to quilt their project. Maybe they have a long arm or whatever. They want to quilt their project afterwards. So the method that we're going to talk about now is assuming that you are going to do this like we used to make tops, right? Yep. So we would just quilt, or we would just
make
basically
make the squares, cut them to the crook size, and then sew them all together, and then quilt.
Add your batting and your backing. So that's what method we're using now.
That's what we're going to show you. This is the traditional way. In the steps on that slideshow, there is a breakdown of how to do that as well.
Yep.
There is a couple different ways that you can do this step here. You're going to get the best results if you do it this way.
Yes. And this is basically what
This is what it is in the instructions.
Yes, they have the two versions.
Yep. Option B in the instructions that I have typed out in there, when we originally started doing the Kimberbell blocks, they didn't have you hooping the fabric, they just had you hooping the stabilizer. And as long as you had a really good tearaway or something floating with that, most of the blocks came out pretty good with that. Not all of them,
right,
but most of them. This will absolutely ensure that you're going to get the best option because you've got it in the hoop. You're going to get better results. But the other way is a little bit less stress.
Yeah, especially if you don't hoop well.
So if you are one of those people that really struggle, you can find the center of your fabric, just hoop the stabilizer, and then find center in the hoop, tape the fabric that way, so it's not in the hoop, but it still tapes down.
Yep.
But you're definitely going to need tearaway, which we're going to talk about too.
Yes.
So what we have here, the little bit of prep, center of our 6.5 by 6.5 square of background fabric absolutely needs to have a fusible on the back. This is where that's really going to come into play of absorbing those stitches. Without batting and a basting tack down type thing, it's all on its own out there. So it's going to draw in really easily if you have a really stitch intensive block going on top of it. This satin stitch probably won't do any terrible things to it, but you guys have definitely done enough Kimberbell to know that we've got blocks that have, windows and all kinds of things that are very, very stitch intensive. So make sure that you aren't skipping those steps because you will regret it later.
Yep, absolutely.
All right, so we're going to find center and then we're going to tape it to our stabilizer. Once we have that, make sure that you are putting your hoop in the right way and then line up as best you can with your hoop markings.
we know that our hoop markings are not going to be true center.
They're not exactly center.
But it is going to help you keep it square. And if you really, really, really want it to be perfectly centered, you can use those plastic inserts that you've got.
The grids.
The grids.
Absolutely.
Yep.
And the other thing to keep in mind when you're doing this, if you are not 100% straight, you can fix that in your trim out later.
Yes.
So don't stress about 1 or 2 degrees off, because you can make sure that when you're trimming it to the correct size, you are getting it centered and straight, and then go from that.
You don't want to be 15 or 20 degrees off.
No,
but
absolutely
if it's a couple,
not. But if you're just a little bit off, it's going to be okay, because you've got a lot of, you've got
fabric.
2 extra inches total. So you've got some playroom.
Yes.
Don't sweat the small stuff.
Exactly.
All right, so I'm going to get this as close as I can. And tight. Wait, no, that's not tight. Oh, that's not tight. All right, so what we of course don't want to do, don't start pulling and warping your fabric. If you don't like what it is, pop it out and put it back in.
Yes.
All right, don't pull on your stabilizer, which will then pull on your fabric.
Because then it'll be stretched for a different reason.
A whole nother slew of problems instead of the ones that we've already talked about preventing.
Yes.
So you can't see it super easily, but the center point is pretty close to underneath the needle. But you do want to check that.
Can you zoom out a little bit on there? It might be easier for them to see.
I don't know if, I think it's just
the
underneath the.
Yeah. That's a little better.
Maybe.
There you go. They can see. Here's our center.
All right, so there is center. And before you start stitching, you want to make sure that you have hooped close to center.
Yeah.
So again, you don't want to be way off. A little bit, it's not going to be a big deal. All right, so depending upon your machine, you might have a laser light that will drop down and show you where your needle position is. You may have a crosshair that drops down, or you might not have any of those things. If you don't, just take your hand wheel and drop the needle and see. So I am slightly to the right based on my needle drop. So I can go to my move arrow and I'm just like, that's not the right way.
Move left to go right.
Move left to go right. And so I can do that. I'm just turn that back off. And then double check again. So if you don't have all the fancy tools, you still have the ability to check those things.
Yep.
All right. And yes, we are using cutaway stabilizer. This is the same no-show mesh or light mesh cutaway from Kimberbell. It's the same stuff that we've been using. This is what you don't want to use the white cutaway, because that's going to add a lot of weight to that quilt.
Yes.
So this is what you want, because it's not going to add all of that bulk weight in there. Okay, so that is to answer Kathy. So hopefully if you had another question, let me know. All right, I think we're good.
Yeah.
So at this point, we're not quilting. We're just going to do the embroidery design. So we start just like we did before.
Did you add the tearaway yet?
Oh, nope. I had it here, but I didn't do it. Said I was going to talk about it, and then I didn't. I'm just a big fat liar.
That's okay. They don't need it for this part. So if you have a basting box on your machine, you could certainly use that to help hold everything together, because you're not quilting, so you don't have that built-in box
to hold everything
in place. Yeah.
So these are the ribbon lines that we had before. Same stitch as what we did before. It's just no quilting and batting and everything behind it. So the key is getting your fabric centered as close as possible to the middle of the hoop, so that your embroidery is going to be centered on there. Again, you do have a little bit of wiggle room, so don't sweat the small stuff, but neither do you either want to just throw it in there and have it all crooked and whatnot, because that won't work either. So I'm going to use the same tape that I used last time, because it's just sitting here.
And we're doing exactly the same thing that she did before. She's taping all 4 sides in, making sure that the long part of the ribbon is on the outside. So she's taping just a little bit to the inside. She's putting that right over top of that line, making sure you're covering it completely because we don't want our foot to get stuck on anything. The main difference here is that we didn't do any of that quilting. So we basically just started right in on the design. So this is going to be that tack down.
All right, so I didn't take the hoop out or anything, so we're just going to go ahead and tack that in place. Doop, doop, doo. And you want roughly a 1/4 inch-ish. It doesn't have to be exact. I remember reading a few people were freaked out that they didn't have the exact amount of white ribbon that they needed.
Oh, yeah.
It doesn't matter. You have so much white ribbon. Just cut equal pieces. They're going to be fine. They're supposed to be around 9 inches a piece, I think.
Yeah.
And it is literally so much ribbon to tie all of those things together. So don't stress that you don't have enough ribbon when you get to that point. Because it will not matter. Just kind of fold them all equally and then cut. I cut the first 2 sets, so the first 8, I cut at 9 inches, and then I looked at what I had left for the last one and just evenly cut those because it's a lot harder to get 12 even pieces than it is to get 4. So, and again, that tape just rips cleanly off.
It's so nice, isn't it?
It's very, very easy to remove. All right, I'm going to do 2 things at this point. I'm going to add my water-soluble topper so that my foot doesn't get caught on any of those edges.
Step number 1.
And I'm going to put tearaway underneath. This is like, you guys can even hear that. It is like heavy paper. This is heavy tearaway. And I am just going to float that underneath my design. And I can see that through my stabilizer to make sure that I'm getting in the right area. I didn't worry about it at the beginning because they weren't anything that were going to cause draw in, but the this portion is going to be where I'm starting to get some pull if I have any.
Yeah.
So in theory, though, you're probably going to put that down at the beginning of your block.
Yeah.
All right. So just throwing that in there. All right. So at this point, we're going to do the placement line for our present fabric. Wanted to say gift, and I'm like, that's not the word they use on this one. But my brain couldn't get past gift. Couldn't get past the gift. It just was stuck there. Now, just like last time, we are not removing that water soluble. That's keeping those ribbon edges out of danger area. So we're going to completely cover up that stitch with our fabric and tack it down. Once you start stitching, your tearaway underneath is now going to be adhered to the base because as soon as it starts stitching, it grabs hold of that. So it's now right underneath there as well.
Yep, which might change the sound of your machine a little bit. You might hear a little bit
more noise.
Yeah, as the needle sort of perforates
because
that.
It's like paper, it's almost like a popping noise sometimes with that heavy tearaway underneath there.
Yeah, totally normal.
And so at this point, we remove the fabric only. Again, we're not trimming off the water soluble because we want to make sure that that ribbon stays away from our foot. So it's going to stay there for the remainder of the stitch out. I just have to get my scissor around it. All right. And last but not least is that final satin stitch, which this is again a 6-minute stitch out.
Yep. So we're going to run a little bit longer than our usual hour. We are going to do one. We're going to do a 2.5 by
a small block to show
a
what
filler
your
block piece.
A filler block piece.
And I did load the 2.5 by 2.5 file.
I saw that.
On there. So
I saw you took Hermione for a run.
Yeah, we'll show you what we did just to help. And obviously, it's not a necessity. Lisa completed her entire project without having a problem with that. But I also realize that, you know, everybody's machines are a little bit different, and
everybody's stress level, or I mean, what we can all handle, or you know, I didn't stress when I was like, oh, it's smaller. Okay, I'm just going to trim my stabilizer out, so I'm filling it in.
Yeah.
I don't sweat the small stuff, but
yes.
You know, there's certainly, you know, less experience and whatnot. If you're newer to doing all of these things, you look at it and you go, oh my gosh, now what do I do?
Now what do I do? Yeah.
So it's just like we said, some options to make it easier.
Yeah.
Ugh. I know, right? Does that feel like 1,000 stitches a minute?
No, it feels.
But I checked it. It is.
I know. We're like we're spoiled. I know. It's funny because, you know, before our Luminaires and the Solaris came out, my gosh, this was it, right?
This was it. This was the top of the line, right?
And now it just seems like it's almost like
it seems small.
It's like a little toy, right? It's not by any stretch of the imagination. But I'm like, okay, my foot's not going down. The butt,
I know.
Everything is in a different spot.
That's the one that keeps getting me, and I'm like,
why is it red?
Why is it red?
Red is bad. Yep.
So then I'm thrown even more for a loop when I put the foot down and it's still red. I'm like, shoot, now what?
Your helper failed to push the rest of the buttons.
Don't sweat the small stuff.
Right.
You know, there's things worth worrying about, and there's things not worth worrying about.
Yeah.
We all have enough stress in our life. We don't need to add to it.
Right. I have been working on that, the half square triangle thing. Oh my! I looked the other day, and I have like 7 blocks done. Only 7 completed blocks. There's like 18 in that one. I'm like, I'm gonna be sewing this till Christmas. I sewed all day on Sunday on that, and only completed like 4 blocks.
Is it like a spot of the quilt that you could sew together?
Maybe. Like I could put 4 blocks together or something.
Just bring it in to show, and then
but
work on it when you want to work on it instead of feeling like you have to work on it.
I'm just like, it's so cute.
Yeah.
But it's so time consuming. And of course I want everything to be perfect, so I can't just whiz through it.
Yes.
So I want them.
Neither of us are half-assers, are we?
No,
That's not really an option.
So.
Yeah, I have a quilt. I bought all of the fabric, and you actually got me the triangle, the paper.
Oh, the paper, yeah.
I have no squares done. I have a lot of half square triangles floating around, but I have no squares done, actually put together for that. It's all in a little box.
Yeah.
I'm just like, no, I got other things to do.
Rebecca says, she loves the idea of trimming the stabilizer to keep accurate seam allowance. Yeah, we've been this isn't our first Kimberbell quilt, and it's not the first time she's had filler blocks, so it isn't the first time that we've been like, what should we do?
Right. I've encountered it before, and that's just been my fix. So I'm glad you liked it. You're very welcome. Back when we were doing things this way, it didn't matter. Your filler block, as long as you cut it correctly, went in, and then you quilted it afterwards, just like normal, quote unquote. But with the pre-quilting, it's become a thing.
Yeah.
I have done it where I have pre-cut my batting, or I haven't pre-cut my batting. I've done it where I fused the batting to the piece.
Yeah.
Which I think helped a little bit.
Yeah.
Because it gave that a little bit more stability.
Right.
So that is certainly an option. When I did it, I actually fused it before I put it in. So I put the fusible on, I cut it and then fused it and then just put it in there loose. I think the smarter way to do that would be tack the batting down with the fusible up,
Yeah,
and then fuse
down
the
I think
fabric
so
to that after the fact. Super simple, just be like a piece of glitter or whatever that, you know, you hit it and boom, and now it's stuck and it's not going to shift. And
exactly.
You have less, I would think, less draw in doing it that way.
Yeah. But a lot of times I say, like, don't share our designs. Feel free to share these boxes with anybody. Like, if you have friends that are doing this quilt and they're like, I'm not getting it, send them to the website. It's free. It's completely free. You know, download it. If it helps anybody, great. They're super easy, so I'll do them for the pie one that's coming up too, and you know, pretty soon there'll be a nice collection of those. And it's just, I wanted to keep them separate because because those 3 steps are a little bit different.
They're different, right? You want to use a different type of
them. Yes.
All right. So once you have that, you're going to, for this particular block, remove the topper and chuck that, and then pop that out of your hoop. So this looks really close to what we had before. But of course, we have, so there's our tearaway. As we said, it's practically all torn away for me because of that perforation as it's stitching. I can take out the center as well. So I only have it underneath the stitching. So I'm not adding, again, bulk and weight to the quilt. And then I can tie these to keep them out of my way for cutting. So you can do this the same way as, I'm just going to make a little funky bow. All right. When you look at your piece this time, you can see if you drew your line all the way out. Let me zoom in just a little bit because I don't think they can see super well. So you can still see the blue line. And that is where the white arrows are going to line up to. So that is how you would then center this block, is put the white arrows, which are the centering points of this ruler, on the center crosshair that you drew originally, and then you would trim. So it's literally that simple to use the orange block rulers with a non-quilted piece. It's just like that, and boom, we're done.
Yes.
So very, very straightforward. I'm not going to take the time to trim it because we're already running over. Right. All right.
Okay. So giant hoop.
Giant hoop. Sorry. We have just the no-show mesh, which to do a filler block, which we've got, we're just going to do a little guy so it goes really fast for you. We've got batting and we've got fabric, excuse me.
Yep.
And we've got stabilizer in the hoop.
And if you followed our instructions and you pre-cut your batting to your filler piece sizes, they would both be the same size. So we're just doing that 2.5-inch size. So what we're going to do first is we're going to give you a placement line for the batting. And this should be exactly the same size. It's 2.5 by 2.5, so it's the size of the batting and the fabric. But because they're already pre-cut to exactly the size, I wanted to make sure that you got it in the right place so that you could trim. Then your batting goes down.
All right, so we put that in position, and then the tack down is going to be a 1/4 inch inside that.
Yep. And we do not want the batting to be in our seam. So it's a double stitch line here just to tack that down. And then we're going to trim that off. You going to trim here or over there?
I'll just do it here, but
okay.
I got to pull it out a little bit.
All right.
I can't get to that top.
And the reason we do that double run is so that you can get real close to that without like going through your stitches. And if you snip a stitch or two, it'll still be in really well. So now the first line that we did is, again, that 2.5 by 2.5. So now this becomes the place where you put your fabric. So you're just going to place your fabric over top of that. And then the next stitch out is going to be a slightly longer stitch, so a little bit bigger stitch, and it's going to go right over on top. So it's going to be essentially your seam line. But it's only going to go around one time. All right, so now your fabric is going to be held in place. And then I did pick a design that had quite a bit of stitching, just so that you could see. And then we'll put the foot down. And then this is how you would just do the quilting. And because we gave you those designs that didn't have the extra box around them, you don't have to move forward and backwards.
Right, you don't have to jump
in your design, so you don't have to worry about getting the right one. And then rather than redoing that batting placement line, which is a smaller stitch and a double stitch rung, this one should help.
So that literally covered like the whole block. If it was going to pull, it would have, right?
Yep.
I mean, in theory.
In theory.
So here we have, you can see that that is pretty much right on all the way around. There was just a hair of shifting, but I'd certainly be able to use that without any concerns.
So you can use that.
And part of that is just the bend up.
Right.
Pressing that out would actually probably put it right where it needs to go.
Yep. So hopefully, if anybody is struggling with this, you can pull those designs, you can put them in, and it will make it a little bit easier for you and maybe a little bit less stressful. You could certainly use those boxes with your Kimberbell designs and just forward through any of those designs.
So a lot of theirs have the clear blue tile option as well, which a clear blue tile option wouldn't have
you
all of that squaring
dump a
stuff.
Clear blue tile.
You could dump a clear blue tile design.
That sounds funny, doesn't it? Dump a clear blue tile. Yeah, but just one of those designs inside that box, and then you wouldn't have those.
You wouldn't have
pieces.
that either.
So lots of choices. We're just trying to make it easier for everybody. It's a big quilt, and
it's kind of an overwhelming when you're looking at it. So just break it down into small sections and don't let it get to you. It's not. There wasn't anything that I was like, wow, this is super hard.
No.
It's just a matter of lots of steps. So just take it in sections and have fun with it, because they are so darn cute.
They are.
Once you start stitching it, you won't be able to stop, because it is absolutely adorable.
Right. I think that's it for today.
That's it for today. We will be back next week with the little bit more involved block, so the multi-hooping, and we will show you the alignment technique that she uses in this book, because it's different than what we've had in any other book.
Absolutely.
So we will show that one stitched out next week as well, and we'll talk about those and take any questions. So if you have them, write them down and bring them next week. We will see you for Cup of Cheer on Wednesday at 10.
Yes, and some of you will see tomorrow.
Some of you will see tomorrorow, and some of you will see next Tuesday. And we'll see you lots of times. But Cup of Cheer
we'll
Wednesday.
Next week, same time.
All right,
bye, guys.